Through yoga, you can uncover what you really want, find harmony in your many roles, and motivate yourself to take action and achieve your goals. This is the Yoga Hacks Podcast with me, Brett Larkin. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel where I have free classes on both yoga and meditation releasing 3 times a week. And go deeper with me in my members-only community, Uplifted, to get feedback from me on your yoga poses, monthly training plans, member-only videos, podcasts, and more. Welcome to today's episode, which is all about willpower. So often we turn to yoga for stress relief. We turn to yoga when we have an injury and we're trying to heal. We turn to yoga when we're trying to calm down. And all of these things are fantastic, and I want you to encourage to use your yoga practice for all these reasons. But what I want to talk about on today's episode is really finding your deepest why of why you come to your mat and why you do yoga. Because this is what's going to really motivate you to get on your mat no matter what, even when you don't feel like it. Something that is often overlooked, and I feel like it's not talked about in the yoga community as much as I wish it were, is that it takes a lot of willpower to have a consistent practice, right? A lot of times our visuals that we have of yogis in society today, right, are people who are really calm or really chill or very go with the flow. And all these qualities are wonderful. But my experience has been that the reality, in order to have a really consistent practice, that you're showing up every day and that you really need to transform your life for the better, is it takes a tremendous amount of willpower to do that. And that willpower energy is very different from this sort of like flowy, go with the flow, feel good kind of energy that I think yoga is sometimes associated with. That willpower energy is like pure strength and determination. I think of it really coming from the third chakra, the place of our centered fire, heating, manifestation self. And it really makes me think of the warrior poses, right? When you're in warrior 2 and gazing over that front middle finger, or you're in a deep lunge and you're holding your arms above the head. That's the kind of energy that is really all about strength and power. And the reality is that we need that just as much as we need yoga as a way to calm down in terms of being able to get to the mat every day. So in this episode, I want to give you a couple tips on how you can make sure that your practice is consistent, make sure that you always show up, and that you have that willpower. Okay, let's dive into the tips. Okay, so tip number 1 for really amping up your willpower, always getting on the mat, having that more disciplined, always doing it energy is number 1, to just see your practice everywhere. And by that, I mean put your mat out where you see it all the time. I've talked about this in a previous blog post. I think it's called How to Always Do Morning Yoga No Matter What. I'll link it below this podcast. But having the visual of seeing your mat is so important, and it's really gonna just, again, willpower is really hard, and seeing the mat is just going to make it easier. So a great example of this is I'm currently traveling, I'm on the road, I brought my little travel mat, and even though the first hotel room I stayed in was so small that I barely had the space to lie it down, I took it out of my suitcase right away and I put it down on the floor. And I pop a down dog here and there, even just as I come into the room after I take my shoes off, after a day of like touring or doing work. Literally seeing the mat is huge. So that's just like the easiest way that you can sort of like help out your willpower, right? It's just like make the mat visible, take it out, even if you're traveling. If you brought it in your suitcase, awesome, that's the first step. But I in the past have traveled with my mat, but then not taking it out of the suitcase is like the first thing I take out and lay down on the ground. So whether you're at home or you're traveling, just get that mat visible, get it out where you can see it. It's going to be a visual cue and reminder that's going to help you. All right, tip number 2 is that I want you to always know what class you're doing and sort of visualize doing the class. Okay, so what do I mean by that? You can waste so much time like picking what yoga class to do. Have you ever done that? Like maybe gone on YouTube and you're just like surfing classes, my classes or other people's classes, trying to decide what routine to do. And that can waste 10 to 15 minutes of what you could spend practicing. It's also just another mental hurdle because instead of just going straight to your mat and knowing what you're going to do, you have to make a decision, right? You have to choose which class to do first, which may not seem like a big deal, but trust me, just the fact that you have to make that decision is hurting your willpower, right? You're not working with your willpower, you're making it harder for yourself. So one of the things that I really, really suggest is to decide what class you're doing the night before and then visualize yourself doing it. And this is one of the reasons my membership community, Uplifted, is so powerful. Like shameless self-promotion here, but it's true, because in Uplifted, we have training plans every month where you're assigned a class 3 times a week. So you always know what class you're doing. And people in the membership and myself, because I try to do it with the members, it is such a relief. It's insane what a relief it is to just know what class you're doing. And of course, you can always switch out a different class for a different day or end up like starting with the video and kind of modifying and doing your own thing. The point isn't that you have to always do the exact class that's assigned, but it is such a mental burden, like weight off your shoulders when you have a plan in front of you. So I would really recommend checking out Uplifted, BrettLarkin.com/uplifted, if you're interested in just getting these structured training plans every month, because I became really passionate about it because I noticed that even myself as a teacher, right, like I'm supposed to not have issues getting on the mat. I'm supposed to, know everything and, because like I'm the teacher. I noticed even as a teacher, I was so much happier. I was practicing so much more. It was just such a stress relief to have the training guide and be doing it with the members in my site together. And since adopting this, often there's classes I want to check out or things I'm researching. And what I did is I've actually had my assistant put the classes that I've had her like assign me classes. So I'll say like, hey, I'm interested in these topics or these teachers, or I'm putting something together around this. These are the kind of classes I'm interested in. Can you put together basically like a training plan for me so that when I get up, I'm not like searching for what class to do. They're like right there on a list for me. So it's kind of like a ugly Google Doc version of things that I'm like researching, basically the equivalent of the training plan guide. And a lot of the times I start doing those classes and I don't like them, or I decide I really want to research something else. And, like I'd say 90% of the time I end up doing my own personal practice instead. But just having that organization is insanely helpful. So do not underestimate the power of just having a class assigned to you or just having a plan given to you. At this point, I'm even paying myself for like my assistant to make that plan for me, because our time is valuable. Our time is precious. And the less you can think about what class you're going to do and the more it's just an automatic, that's a huge win. To talk a little bit about the second tip here, still part of tip 2, visualize doing it, is what's great is when you have a class assigned, in addition to not having to think about it in the morning, you can actually visualize that class the night before and kind of plant the seed as you go to bed. Definitely check out my podcast on the Miracle Morning for sort of hacks on my morning routine and sort of like how I kind of integrated a lot of stuff into my nighttime routine to feed my morning routine. There's a podcast called Miracle Morning. I think it might be the podcast 1 or 2 before this. And if you're a member of Uplifted, there's a member-only podcast that goes a lot deeper on how I'm working with all these concepts. But visualizing the class before you go to bed, looking at your training guide, or your own personal plan if you don't want to use my training guide and become part of my community, whatever you're doing, just see what the class is, think about it before bed. And something that several members and people who've taken my Beginner Yoga Jumpstart program have told me they do is actually watch the class in bed before bed, like on their iPad or whatever, so they can see the sequence and sort of see what's coming. And people who are a beginner have told me that this was really helpful for them, and that in my Beginner Yoga Jumpstart program, You can check that out at BrettLarkin.com/BYJ, which stands for Beginner Yoga Jumpstart. But that's something I never thought to suggest to people, and people in that program just started doing it and said it was really helpful because, especially if you're a beginner, it's hard, you're looking at the screen a lot. Obviously in the beginner classes I teach much slower and I try to make it really beginner friendly, but it's such a great idea to actually preview the sequence the night before so you really know what's coming, and then you can do it in the morning. So that's kind of just like a bonus tip for beginners. Even if you're an advanced student, I'd look at your training guide, look at whatever plan you're using the night before, post it on your wall, have it by your bedside, but just set the intention that you're doing that class tomorrow, whether it's in the morning or whenever you're doing it. Just sort of this pre-meditative, I want to call it, or like pre-plan, like that you have a plan, right? Because if you have a plan, it's like the willpower part becomes so much easier, and it's really nice because it's like you're taking care of yourself. Okay. Tip number 3 with willpower, always getting on your mat, is accountability. And sorry to, talk again, but this, when I was putting together Uplifted, the membership community, I was really looking for what other membership platforms or yoga streaming services sort of lack. And what I saw they lacked was like this structure, right? A lot of them have like huge libraries of classes. I belong to many of them. But again, I'm wasting time every day trying to like pick what class I should do. At the same time, we all have goals. Like we're trying to like strengthen our core. We're trying to open our hips. So all my guides are kind of designed around that and by what the community sort of wants in a plan. So I'm also putting the classes together for you in an order that makes sense. Like these other streaming services, I didn't feel like really did that. I just felt lost all the time. And the other piece was there was no accountability, right? Like some of them you can't even leave a comment. Leaving a comment isn't even really accountability. But what we've created in Uplifted in the membership community is just this crazy sense of community and belonging and encouraging and supporting one another, bigger than I've ever experienced actually in like a studio. And it's because we're all on these training plans and we're doing the same class at the same time. So there's a communal experience. Even if people are kind of modifying and doing their own thing, you're still part of this like bigger movement where we're all committed to coming to our mat with a particular focus each week, each month. So again, another way you could do accountability is to get a friend. Like you don't have to join my membership site. But building in accountability is really going to help you. Again, whether it's a friend, I know that friends have, whether you're doing classes at home with my stuff or another subscription site or whatever, you could text your friend, if you don't use Facebook, and say that you did the class. Just be like, hey, I did today's class, and have them text you back. Again, obviously, if you're in Uplifted, we have the Facebook groups and our private Facebook group, which is amazing, where you can really get that accountability and just feel supported. Again, it's really, really important, and I think people overlook how powerful the accountability piece is. And if you're skeptical about like, can people you don't know on Facebook really motivate you? Like, trust me, you can, and it's amazing, and we're a family, and if you don't want to do that, focus on some kind of partner accountability in real life scenario to help you out. Okay, and tip number 4, this is really the most interesting and sort of the deepest part of this podcast, but is to uncover your deepest why. Uncover your deepest why. And a lot of fitness folks, I've heard this concept talked about before, and they talk about this, and they say, in order to really lose weight, or in order to really stick with your training plan, or in order to really achieve any goal, you need to uncover your deepest why. So not the artificial reason you want to do it, right? But like the deep down reason that you want to do it. And this might require some thought because it's not immediately obvious. Like giving the example of someone who wants to lose weight, like they might say their goal is, they want to fit in their size 6 jeans instead of their size 10 jeans or whatever. But that's a superficial goal. It's not attached to any kind of like really deep meaning. So when it comes time for them to like wake up super early and go to the gym, it's unclear whether switching, unclear whether being a size 4 instead of a size 8 or whatever it is going to be a big enough motivator. However, if they really uncover that their deepest why is that they want to, be more active so they can spend time with their children and set a positive example for their son or daughter, right? Like, wow, that's like a much deeper reason of why they really want to lose weight, right? So again, I'm making these examples up on the fly, but the thing is to really think about your big, deep why for doing yoga. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, if you're in my community, and part of our kind of journey that we're going through together, you probably already know that your deepest why really has to do with living your best life, fulfilling your destiny, uncovering your true self, showing that true self and your light to the world. And that's why you do yoga. And this comes full circle to sort of how I started this episode, because, for me, the deep why of like, I do yoga to relieve my stress, that's not big enough. That's not powerful enough for me. If it is for someone else, that's great. Or I do yoga to calm down. Like, yes, yoga calms me down, but that's not my big, deep why of why I get to the mat, and why I go on the mat every day. For me, it's because I know that yoga is turning me in to the best version of myself. The mat is like our mentor, right? When you're on the mat, you can invite all the different aspects of your personality, like a round table of knights or something, a round table of, all the different parts of yourself, and you can hold all of them. And you can move through your practice and you can breathe, sweat, transform. And what yoga is really about for me is that it brings me into balance, part 1, right? Which is kind of like relieving stress, bringing into balance physically and mentally, right? Because yoga is both. That's why it's magic, right? It's like physical and mental. But not just bring into balance, but like once you're into balance, your true light can really shine and you really become connected with your true identity, right? Because we all have so many identities that we all, are doing every day. We're mothers, we're wives, we're friends, we're, hardcore workers when we go to the office. Like there's so much. But our true identity is something that we can only find when we're in balance, and yoga helps us get in balance. And then it's something that's usually multidimensional and often has conflicting elements, right? Like one thing I talk about a lot, and I have a live YouTube video just about this, about like how to use yoga to integrate the different parts of your identity. It's like a free masterclass. I'll also link that up in below this podcast. But yoga really has the power to kind of let opposite things that may be going on in your life, or seemingly conflicting aspects of your personality or aspects of what's going on in your life right now, be true at the same time, and for you to hold that all. And there's an alchemy that happens that lets you sort of unite and transform that. So for me, like, yoga's about showing up as my best self, but why is because I want to be the best wife I can be, the best daughter I can be, the best future mother I can be, right? And when you put it in that context, my willpower to get on my mat isn't about stress relief, and it's not about becoming more flexible, and it's not about any of these like smaller things. Like ultimately, I'm so committed to getting on my mat because it's about like being the best person I can, not just for me, but for my family. And your reason may be similar to that. It may be a variation on that, but it's definitely worth journaling about. I have a whole podcast here on journaling if you want to dig into how I journal. It's definitely worth thinking about. And if you're struggling with like that willpower, like right now, I know in the training plan we're doing right now in Uplifted, some members are saying, it's hard to get on the mat, or they're struggling. Like, this is my big message to you, is that you need to uncover that why. And when you uncover that deepest why and connect it to your practice, and then get your mat visibly out where you see it all the time, your willpower to get on your mat and do your practice is going to skyrocket, because you'll have this much deeper reason, and that reason's going to fuel you. And that's what's really going to make your practice successful, both on the mat, but it's also going to make you a successful person off the mat. And that's the beauty of yoga. That's why I'm excited about it. I want to thank you so much for listening and tuning into this episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel and absolutely check out Uplifted. If you want to go deeper with me on all of this, BrettLarkin.com/uplifted. I would love to welcome you as a member. And of course, you can join completely for free, sort of see what it's all about, and just check it out for free as a first step. So that's BrettLarkin.com/uplifted. I would love it if you would leave a review of this podcast if you're listening on iTunes. And a lot of you have been asking me about yoga teacher training. I do have an online yoga teacher training that is going to be Yoga Alliance approved, coming out in the next couple months. So you definitely want to be on the early bird notification for that if yoga teacher training or just deepening your practice through yoga teacher training is something you're interested in. And you can sign up to get the early bird rate and sort of be the first to know about the training and when it launches at BrettLarkin.com/train. TRAIN, train. And I would love to see you in the membership, in the teacher training. So much love from my heart to yours. Namaste.